They thought I had left for yoga. They thought my phone was off, but it was recording. What I heard, oh God, what I heard didn't just break my heart. It shattered my reality. I am 58 years old, and in 1 hour, I learned the family I adored was just a facade for a rotten secret. This isn't just about greed. This is something much darker. My name is Margaret. I am 58 years old, and until 6 months ago, I was a senior librarian at the Willow Creek County Branch. Now, I am simply a widow. The house Robert and I built, the one that always smelled of his pipe tobacco and old books, is too quiet now. It is a heavy, suffocating silence that settles in the dust motes dancing in the afternoon light. We live in a quiet suburb in Willow Creek, Oregon, where nothing is supposed to happen. But the silence in this house has started to feel wrong. My son, David, and his wife, Sarah, moved in 3 months ago to take care of you, Mom, David had said, his eyes earnest as he hugged me at the funeral. You shouldn't be alone. He is, or was, a financial advisor at a firm downtown called Clearview Capital Partners. Sarah, a bright young woman who used to work in marketing, gave up her job when they moved. At first, I was deeply, profoundly grateful. The silence was deafening, and their presence seemed like a buffer against the gaping void Robert left behind. But the buffer they brought is heavy. The air in my home has grown thick and sour. David always looks exhausted, shadows under his eyes that speak of sleepless nights. He blames it on the market, on new clients. Sarah, though, she is shrinking. That is the only word for it. She has lost weight so quickly, her clothes hang off her thin frame, and she jumps at the slightest sound, a door closing, the phone ringing. She looks haunted. I try to connect with her. I bring her tea in the afternoons, remembering how she used to love the Earl Grey I keep. Thank you, Margaret, she always whispers, but her eyes dart to the doorway, never quite meeting mine. She offers only fleeting, tense smiles before disappearing. She spends hours locked in their bedroom, the one that used to be Robert's study. David, on the other hand, is almost suffocating. He is overly affectionate, always touching my shoulder, asking if I need anything. But his care is focused on one thing. He asks constantly about my finances, about Robert's portfolio, about the insurance. Just making sure you're secure. Mum, he says, forcing a bright smile. We need to consolidate Robert's assets, make sure everything is safe. It feels less like care and more like he is taking inventory. Then there are the whispers. I have caught David in the hallway well past midnight, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice a low, angry hiss. That wasn't the agreement. I heard him say 2 nights ago. When he saw me, he snapped the phone shut, his face pale. Just a difficult client? Mum, go back to bed. Twice. I have heard Sarah weeping in the guest bathroom, not loud sobs, but the choked, desperate sounds of someone trying to cry without being heard. When I knock, the water runs, and she emerges minutes later, eyes red and swollen, claiming allergies. Last night? The tension finally broke the surface. I was reading in the den, the door slightly ajar. Their voices rose from the kitchen. It was a real argument, sharp and desperate. I heard Sarah's voice, tight with panic. We cannot touch the collection? David? Not that. David's reply was a low growl I did not recognize, vicious and cold. What other choice did you leave me? The collection, Robert's art, his passion. He had spent 30 years acquiring 19th century maritime paintings. They were his soul, displayed in the study that was now their locked room. I went upstairs, pretending I hadn't heard. I dismissed it. Of course I dismissed it. It is the stress. They are living in my house, grieving Robert, managing my fragile state. It is natural to be tense. I trust my son. David is a good boy. He has always been a good boy. He would never do anything to truly hurt me. It was a Tuesday morning, just after 9 a.m. My yoga mat was rolled by the front door. My 10 o'clock class was the one ritual I refused to abandon. The only hour of the week where the knot in my stomach seemed to loosen. I was standing in the kitchen, fumbling with my smartphone. I am no Luddite. But I find typing on that tiny screen tedious. I wanted to make a shopping list, and it was easier to just record my own voice. I opened the memo app and pressed the red circle. Coffee beans, I said, my voice tinny. Milk, olive oil, and the good bleach. As I was trying to remember the name of the new soap Robert had liked, I heard the front door open and close. David and Sarah. I had assumed they were already gone. David had mentioned a 9:30 client meeting. And Sarah, well, Sarah usually just stayed in her room until I left. They did not come into the kitchen. They went straight into the adjoining living room, separated from me only by a wide, open archway. They did not know I was still there. You have to call them back, Sarah's voice said. It was not her usual whisper. It was sharp, brittle, like a shard of glass. Do you think I haven't tried? David hissed back. They want the payment by Friday. Friday. Sarah. Where am I supposed to get that kind of money? My hand froze over the phone. I glanced at the kitchen clock. 9:43. I was going to be late. I needed my keys. I tapped the phone screen to stop the recording, but in my haste, I must have missed the button, only locking the screen. I set the phone down on the granite countertop, right next to the fruit bowl, the microphone pointing toward the living room. My keys were not on the counter. I spun around, annoyed. They were on the little hook by the garage door. Of course. I grabbed my yoga mat, slung my bag over my shoulder, and hurried out, pulling the door shut behind me, thinking only of the traffic on the main road. The phone sat on the counter. Its screen was dark, but the internal microphone was wide open, a silent witness. For the next hour, I breathed. I stretched. I flowed from one pose to the next, visualizing the tension leaving my body, visualizing the heavy, grey atmosphere of my house evaporating. I focused on my breathing, in and out, finding a moment of fragile peace. When I returned, just after 11:30, the house was profoundly silent. David's sedan was gone. Sarah's little blue car was gone, too. A wave of relief washed over me. I would have the house to myself for a few hours. I walked into the kitchen to make some tea and stopped. My phone was sitting exactly where I had left it, screen dark, next to a bunch of overripe bananas. I picked it up. I unlocked the screen, and the voice memo app was still open. The timer read 1 hour, 12 minutes, and 23 seconds. A flush of annoyance hit me. I had left it recording this entire time. An hour of the refrigerator humming and the mail slot clicking shut. I pressed the square stop button, and the file saved itself, new recording 24. My thumb moved immediately to the delete button, but I paused. I remembered the sound of their voices when they walked in. sharp, desperate. I thought of the fight I had overheard last night about the collection. That argument in the living room this morning, it was not just stress. It was something else. A knot of cold curiosity tightened in my chest, overriding my guilt about eavesdropping. I was alone. I could just listen. Just the first few seconds. Just to put my mind at ease, to confirm it was just the normal friction of a family under stress. I sat down at the kitchen table, the silence of the empty house suddenly feeling heavy, expectant. I unwrapped the white earbuds I use for my audiobooks and plugged them into the phone. I tapped New Recording 24 and pressed play. I put the earbuds in. At first, it was just silence, the low electronic hum of an open microphone. I could hear the sound of the refrigerator compressor clicking on. I heard my own footsteps fading as I walked to the garage, the sound of the door sliding open and then thudding shut. Silence again. For several minutes. I scrubbed forward on the timeline, past the mail slot clicking shut, past the furnace kicking in. Then, voices. They were muffled at first, as if they were still in the entryway. I heard the click of Sarah's heels on the hardwood floor as she must have walked into the living room. Her voice came through the earbuds, and it was so sharp, so cold. It made me flinch. You cannot wait any longer. David. They will not wait. We have to sell them by the end of the week. Sell them a cold dread, colder than grief, began to creep up my spine. David's voice answered, and it was not the confident tone of my son. It was thin, desperate, and cracking. It will kill her. It will literally kill Mom. That collection was Dad's entire life. My breath hitched. The collection. Robert's maritime paintings. They were talking about Robert's art. Sarah's voice dropped, becoming a low, vicious snarl. It will kill us if you do not pay. Do you understand me? They are not asking any more. They will come here. They will come to this house, and they will take everything. Do you want them to talk to your mother? My heart stopped. Not just skipped, but stopped cold in my chest. Who were they pay for what? Who was this woman, this stranger in my house, threatening my son, threatening to sell my dead husband's legacy? I heard a sharp, cracking sound. A sound so loud it made my ears ring. It was a slap. Unmistakable. Then, a new sound. Sobbing. It was Sarah. But this was not the quiet, muffled crying I had heard through the bathroom door. This was the sound of a complete, gasping breakdown. I am so tired, she choked, the words broken. I am so tired of covering for you. David said nothing. I heard his heavy footsteps pace the room. Then he spoke, his voice suddenly calm, flat, and dead. Just get it done. Do what you have to do. I'll tell her they need cleaning, or an appraisal. She'll believe me. I ripped the earbuds from my ears. The silence of the kitchen rushed back in, but my head was roaring. I was shaking, my hand trembling so badly I could barely hold the phone. I stared at it, at this little black rectangle that had just detonated my life. I pressed the stop button. The file sat there. New Recording 24. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of the horror. It was all so clear. My son, my grieving, gentle David, was being terrorized. This woman, this creature he had married, was not just a quiet, nervous houseguest. She was a monster. She was threatening him. She had hit him, that sound. It had to be her striking him. She was a violent, cruel gold digger, forcing him to sell his father's heritage to pay for God knows what. A pure, undiluted rage, hotter than any emotion I had felt since Robert's death, flooded my body. It burned away the grief and the confusion, leaving only a cold, hard certainty. Sarah was the enemy. She had invaded my home. She was abusing my son, and she was trying to steal what was left of my husband. My first conclusion was sharp, simple, and absolutely wrong. I thought I have to save David. I have to get this parasitic woman out of my house. My hand was shaking as I held the phone. I did not delete the file. I, a retired librarian, did the only thing that made sense to me. I catalogued it. I renamed New Recording 24 to Robert Choch Taxes 1998, the most boring, unsearchable title I could invent. I moved it from the main audio folder into a nested file 3 layers deep, a digital graveyard where I kept the warranty scans for a refrigerator I no longer owned. It vanished. Safe. My first impulse was pure, white-hot rage. I wanted to march into their room, hold the phone up, and watch their faces crumble. I wanted to scream at Sarah, to demand she get out of my house, out of my son's life. But I stopped. I am not a screamer. I am a planner. Confronting her now, with one piece of evidence, would be foolish. She would lie. She would deny it. She would twist it. Claim I was the one confused, grieving, hearing things. She would turn David against me, making me the villain. No. If I was going to save my son from this monster, I needed more. I needed a case. I needed proof so undeniable that David could not escape it, and she could not deny it. So I became an actress. I took a deep breath, splashed cold water on my face, and walked out of the kitchen as the same person I had been when I left for Yoga Margaret, the sad, frail, slightly befuddled widow, a woman still lost in the fog of her husband's death. I became invisible, harmless. I made them tea that afternoon. I smiled, my face a perfect mask of maternal warmth. "Sarah, dear, you look peaky," I said, my voice full of false concern. "Are you eating enough?" "I'm fine, Margaret," she mumbled, not looking at me. "Just so tired," David said, coming up behind her, rubbing her shoulders. I saw her flinch at his touch. "We're both just so tired." From that moment on, I watched them. I was no longer a participant in this household. I was a spy. I observed Sarah, expecting to find the triumphant queen, the cruel manipulator. I looked for the subtle smirk, the expensive new purchase, the glint of victory in her eyes. I found nothing. The woman I observed was not a predator. She was prey. She was still shrinking, the hollows under her eyes darker than ever. She looked like she had not slept in weeks. She ate almost nothing, just pushing food around her plate with a trembling fork. She looked, quite simply, like she was dying of exhaustion. On Thursday, I saw the proof. She was reaching into the cupboard for a mug, and the long sleeve of her cardigan snagged, pulling back just enough. Her wrist was a disgusting, mottled canvas of purple and yellow. It was not a single mark. It was a cluster. It looked exactly like the imprint of fingers, squeezed too hard. My stomach lurched. I kept my voice light, airy. "Oh, goodness. Sarah, what on earth did you do to your arm?" She jumped, yanking the sleeve down so fast she nearly dropped the mug. Her eyes, wide with panic, darted to the hallway, as if checking if David was near. "Oh," she said, forcing a laugh that sounded like a cough. "It's nothing. I'm just so clumsy. I I ran right into the bedroom door. Hard. You know me. I nodded slowly, sipping my tea. You must be more careful, dear. A door. She had run into a door. It was the most pathetic, transparent lie I had ever heard. The shape was not from a door. It was from a hand. My mind was reeling. Did David do that? The thought was a betrayal. My David. Gentle David. Or was it they? The people she was so afraid of. I started watching David. He was the one who controlled everything. I realized now that Sarah had no autonomy. David handled all the joint finances. When we went to the market, David paid. When Sarah needed gas, David handed her a $20 bill. I never saw her with her own wallet, her own cards, and the packages. David started receiving strange deliveries, almost daily. Not the usual Amazon boxes, but plain brown-wrapped parcels from overnight courier services. He would wait by the window, and the second the van pulled up, he would be out the door, snatching the package before the driver was even back in his truck. He hid them in the garage, which he now kept locked. Just some sensitive client files. Mum, he said, his smile too wide, too fast. You know, Clearview Capital Partners. High security? I stood in the kitchen that night, long after they had gone to bed, the house finally still. The story I had constructed, Sarah the villain, David the victim, was starting to crack. The pieces did not fit. My designated villain looked like a prisoner of war, and my victim was the one locking doors, controlling the money, and receiving secret packages. The narrative in my head was wrong. I needed to get into his laptop. That was the next step. My son, David, for all his talk of financial security, was careless with his own. He was a creature of habit. His laptop password had been the same since he was a teenager. It was the name of his first dog, Buddy, followed by the number 123. I waited until the following Saturday. David announced he had an emergency client meeting at the office. Sarah said she was going to the main supermarket across town, the one that takes at least 2 hours. I watched from the window as both their cars pulled out of the driveway, one after the other. The house was empty. My hands were already shaking. I walked into their bedroom. It smelled stale, like fear and unwashed clothes. His laptop was on the desk, plugged in. I sat in his chair, my heart hammering against my ribs. The login screen glowed at me. I typed it in BUDDY123. The desktop opened. It was messy, cluttered with icons. I opened his web browser first. I went straight to the search bar. I was still focused on the collection. I typed Art Dealers Portland. Nothing. Rare Art Auction. Nothing. 19th Century Maritime Art Appraisal. A few local museums, but nothing in his history. My hypothesis was failing. If they were selling the art, where was the research? Where were the emails? I checked his email. The main inbox was full of spam and newsletters. I looked in his sent folder. Nothing but a few messages to his boss at Clearview Capital Partners. This was wrong. I was missing something. I went back to the browser and clicked on the History tab. View full history. My heart did not just sink. It felt like it was ripped out of my chest and dropped onto the floor. It was not art. It was not auctions. The list that scrolled down the screen was endless. Hundreds of entries, sometimes dozens in a single hour. Bet Royal. Stake Harbor. Aces High Casino. Live Score Bet. And in between them, other, more desperate links, quick cash lenders. Fast Loan Now. Same day payday. I clicked on his email icon again, this time looking deeper into his spam and trash folders. They were not from art collectors. They were from creditors. Dozens of them. Red, bold-faced warnings. Your payment is 30 days past due. Final notice. Your account is in default. Mr. Evans, we must hear from you. I felt dizzy, sick. I was looking at the digital footprint of a man I did not know. This was not my son. This was a desperate stranger. I kept digging. I found an email from his boss, sent 2 weeks ago. It was not a client update. It was a formal notice. David, pending a full internal audit, you are suspended without pay due to significant irregularities in client accounts. Irregularities in client accounts. He had been stealing. He had not just lost his own money, he had been stealing from his clients. But the final, most sickening blow was not in the browser. It was in a folder on his desktop labeled Household. I thought it might be bills. I clicked. It was full of audio files. My blood ran cold. I recognized the naming convention. Living room, fight, Oki 2. Kitchen, argument, Nov 5. He had been recording them. He had been recording their fights. I clicked on one, the most recent. My earbuds were still in my pocket. I plugged them in, my hands fumbling. It was not Sarah's sharp, cold voice I heard first. It was David's. He was screaming, roaring like an animal. Where is it? You find it? You go to her and you get it. You tell her you need jewelry for a cleaning. You tell her the art needs an appraisal. I do not care what you say. David, please. Sarah's voice was a terrified whisper. She is not stupid. She is grieving. I cannot do this to her. Then David's voice dropped, and the sound was more violent than the scream. It was a low, manipulative hiss. You will, or I will tell her. I will tell my mother you did this. I will tell her you spent all our money, that your marketing job was a lie. I will tell her you are the one with the problem. She will believe me. She will always believe me. I sat there, in the stale air of their bedroom, the sound of my son's voice echoing in my ears from his own secret recording. I will tell her you did this. I will tell her you spent all our money. A horrible, sickening dissonance was tearing through my mind. The two recordings were fighting for space. My recording, where Sarah was the villain. His recording, where he was the monster. I closed his laptop, my hands wooden. I walked out of their room and into my own, closing the door. I needed to hear it again. I needed to hear my recording. I pulled out my phone, went into the nested folders, and found the file, Robert, Taxes, 1998. I plugged in the earbuds and pressed play, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. I listened past my own exit. I heard them enter, and then I heard it all again, but with new ears. It was like a filter had been removed, or rather, the correct one applied. Sarah's sharp voice, "You cannot wait any longer, David." They will not wait. They, not her, a third party, the creditors from his laptop, the loan sharks, the bookies. They would not wait. Sarah was not the one making the demand. She was the one delivering the terrifying news. David's cracking voice, "It will kill her." That collection was Dad's entire life. Sarah's snarl, "It will kill us if you do not pay. Do you understand me? They will come here, and they will take everything." She was not threatening him. She was warning him. She was terrified. She was trying to make him understand the reality of the fire he had lit, a fire that was about to consume them all. And then, the sound. The sharp, sickening crack. The slap. It was followed, not by David's cry of pain, but by Sarah's. I had been so sure, so wrapped in my own righteous anger that I had heard what I wanted to hear. I had assumed she was the aggressor. But now, paired with the sound of David's roaring voice from his own laptop, the truth was as clear as it was grotesque. That was not the sound of Sarah hitting David. That was the sound of my son, my David, hitting his wife. And her words, the ones that followed, the ones I had interpreted as a villain's confession, "I am so tired." She had choked. "I am so tired of covering for you." I ripped the earbuds out. I think I made a sound, a low, guttural moan. The entire narrative I had built, the entire investigation, my role as the grieving mother saving her son from a predator, it all collapsed. It was a house of cards built on a lie. The secret was not that my daughter-in-law was evil. The secret was that my son, my quiet, gentle, grieving son, was a gambling addict. He was a manipulator. He was an abuser. He was a thief, suspended from his job for stealing from clients. In reality, they were not a pair of vipers conspiring against me. In reality, it was a trapped, terrified woman, desperately trying to survive the hurricane of my son. Sarah was not the villain. She was the captive. Her rapid weight loss, her constant jumping at shadows, her locked doors, it was not guilt. It was terror. The bruises on her wrist, the door she had run into, were not from a creditor. They were from my son. He was the one locking the garage. He was the one controlling her money. He was the one threatening her. He was using me, his grieving mother, as a weapon against her. All the anger I had felt for Sarah, that hot, righteous, protective rage, did not disappear. It was a physical thing, a ball of fire in my stomach. And in that moment, it simply turned. It pivoted, slowly and completely, away from the woman I had hated, and aimed itself directly at the son I had adored. It was a new kind of anger. It was not the explosive rage of a wife. It was the cold, terrifying, seismic rage of a mother who has been betrayed. A mother who realizes the monster she was hunting was not an invader, but her own child. I had to act. That cold, seismic rage had settled into a kind of terrible clarity. I could not go to the police. David was still my son, and the scandal from his firm, the theft, would destroy our name. I could not confront him. He was a liar and an abuser, and he would turn it all on Sarah, or worse, on me. I could not do this alone. I needed the person who knew the truth. I needed the insider. I needed my villain. I waited 2 days. I continued my performance. The frail, doddering mother, making tea, commenting on the weather, all the while watching. I waited for the moment when he would leave her alone. It came on Monday afternoon. David, his face pale and slick with sweat, announced he had to go to the city. "A big new client," he said, trying to sound jovial. "Wish me luck." He was going to gamble. Or, I thought, perhaps he was going to meet one of his creditors. It did not matter. He was leaving. I watched his car pull away. I gave it 10 minutes. 10 long minutes where I sat in the kitchen, my hands gripping the cold granite, my heart pounding a slow, heavy drumbeat. Then I went to find her. She was not in their room. I found her in the back garden, huddled on the cold stone bench Robert had built, staring at the withered remains of my rose bushes. She was so thin she looked like a child, and she was trembling, though it was not a cold day. I walked across the damp grass. The sound of my footsteps made her jump, her whole body jerking, her hand flying to her throat. She saw it was me, and the terror in her eyes was replaced by a dull, exhausted dread. I did not speak. I sat down on the bench next to her. The silence stretched out, thick and heavy. She was waiting for me to ask about dinner, or the mail, or the weather. She was waiting for the performance to continue. I ended it. I reached into my pocket and took out my smartphone. I placed it on the bench between us. Her eyes darted to the black screen. Suspicious. I pressed the power button, unlocked the screen, and navigated to the Robert Taxes Scene 98 file. I did not plug in my earbuds. I pressed play, and I turned the volume all the way up. My own voice, tinny, came from the speaker. Coffee beans, milk, then the sound of the garage door, and then the silence. Sarah frowned, confused, and then her own voice filled the garden, sharp and cold. "You cannot wait any longer, David. They will not wait." Sarah's face turned from confusion to a waxy, horrified white. Her mouth fell open. She looked at the phone, then at me, her eyes screaming. I heard David's desperate reply, and then Sarah's own snarling warning. I watched her as she heard herself, as she heard the threat, as she heard the context-free words that had painted her as a monster. And then I let her hear the slap. The sharp, ugly crack echoed off the side of the house. She flinched, a violent, full-body shudder, as if she had been hit all over again, before she could speak, before she could even form a lie. I stopped the recording. My fingers were ice cold as I navigated to my notes, where I had saved a copy of the file from David's laptop. I pressed play on the second file. This time, David's voice roared into the quiet garden. "Where is it? You find it? You go to her? And you get it." Sarah made a sound, a choked, desperate gasp. She was hearing the proof of her own prison. She heard her own terrified whisper, "I cannot do this to her." And then she heard David's final manipulative threat. "I will tell my mother you did this. She will believe me." I pressed stop. The garden was silent again, save for the sound of Sarah's ragged, broken breathing. She was staring at me, tears streaming down her hollow cheeks, her entire body shaking. "You know?" she whispered. It was not a question. I turned to her, my face as hard as the stone bench. "I know he is a liar," I said, my voice low and steady. "Now, you will tell me everything." It was as if I had pulled the pin from a grenade, the explosion of words, of fear, of pain that had been held back for months, burst out of her. She collapsed, folding in on herself, sobbing so hard I thought she might break. "The debt," she choked, her words fragmented. "It is $200,000. At first, it was small, just football. Then he lost his job. He did not tell me. He kept pretending to go to work. He stole all my savings. All of it. He took out payday loans. Margaret, in your name. He's been intercepting the mail." A new wave of cold hit me. "He promised them," she gasped, her voice raw. "He promised the men he owes. He told them he would pay them by selling the collection. He has a buyer, a black market dealer. He is meeting him this Friday. This Friday. Margaret. He is going to sell them, And we are all going to be ruined. The rage I felt in the garden did not dissipate. It crystallized. It became cold, hard, and perfectly clear. Sarah was still weeping, a crumpled figure on the stone bench. I placed a hand on her shoulder, not for comfort, but as an anchor. "Get up," I said. My voice was not my own. It was the voice of the librarian who commanded absolute silence, the voice of a CEO, the voice of a woman who had just lost everything and had nothing left to fear. "You are done crying. He will not be selling anything." She looked up, her face a mask of tear-soaked confusion. "But Margaret, the men, the dealer, Friday." I agreed. "We have work to do." I took her inside and sat her at my kitchen table. I made her a cup of tea so strong it was almost black and put a piece of toast in her hands. "Eat," I commanded. While she mechanically chewed, I went into my study and closed the door. My first call was not to the police. It was to Eleanor Hayes. Mrs. Hayes, as everyone called her, had been Robert's estate attorney for 20 years. She is a woman who wears steel grey suits, owns no pets, and considers sentiment a legal liability. She is precisely who you want in a war. "Margaret," she answered, her voice crisp. "This is late. I apologize, Mrs. Hayes. I am in a crisis. I must see you tonight, and I must bring my daughter-in-law. It is a matter of fraud and theft." There was a pause. "My office. 1 hour?" When we arrived, Sarah was trembling again. Mrs. Hayes led us into her sterile conference room, all glass and dark wood. "Speak," she said. I looked at Sarah, who looked at the floor. I would have to start. "I have reason to believe my son is compromised. He is in significant debt. He is planning to sell off my husband's collection without my consent." Mrs. Hayes just stared at me, her expression unreadable. Then she turned to her monitor and typed. "I am glad you called. Margaret," she said, her eyes on the screen. "Your son, David, telephoned my office last week. He was making inquiries." "Inquiries?" I asked, my blood running cold. "He wanted to know the exact procedure for enacting his power of attorney, specifically in the event you were to be declared mentally unfit or incompetent." I felt the last wisp of motherly sentiment evaporate. The memory loss. The gentle reminders when I forgot things. It was not just gaslighting to control me. It was groundwork. He was building a legal case to have me committed so he could liquidate my entire life. "He's a thief," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "And he thinks I'm an old fool." Mrs. Hayes finally looked up. "Then we must prove him wrong on both counts. Now, tell me everything. From the beginning." We did. I told her about the recordings. Sarah, finding a spark of courage, told her about the $200,000 debt, the threats, the timeline, and the black market buyer. Mrs. Hayes listened, her hands steepled. When we finished, she nodded. "This is not a police matter, not yet. A police report creates a public record. It complicates asset recovery. We will handle this internally. We will let the sale on Friday proceed." "What?" Sarah gasped. "We will let him attempt the sale." Mrs. Hayes corrected. "We will set a stage. He will be the lead actor." The plan was formed right there, under the fluorescent lights of that sterile room. It was cold, brutal, and beautiful. First, Sarah, with her marketing background, would become the perfect, helpful wife. She would help David arrange the safe meeting, suggesting the house as the most secure location, ensuring he felt in complete control. Second, I made a call the next morning to a name Mrs. Hayes had provided, Dr. Croft, a top-tier addiction interventionist, known for handling high-profile, difficult cases. I explained I had a son who was a danger to himself and our family, and that I needed an immediate, binding intervention. He was booked for Friday night. Third, Mrs. Hayes got to work. She drafted an emergency, binding transfer, moving every tangible asset, the house, the art, the stocks, the jewelry, into an irrevocable trust, protected from all creditors and from David. She also prepared a permanent restraining order and, most importantly for Sarah, a non-disclosure agreement paired with a generous severance, protecting her from any legal blowback from David's crimes. But the final piece was the most critical. While David was out on Wednesday, confirming details with his buyer, I had a discreet moving van pull into my driveway. It was not an art dealer. It was a secure storage company. Sarah and I worked for 2 hours. We took every single painting from Robert's collection off the walls. We took my jewelry from the safe. We took the antique silver. We left nothing. "He will know," Sarah panted, staring at the blank, pale rectangles on the walls. "He will." I agreed. I went to the attic, years ago, for a university fundraiser. Robert had bought a set of high-quality, framed photographic reproductions of his favourite pieces. They were worthless, but convincing from 10 feet away. We spent an hour hanging the fakes. On Friday, David would not be selling his father's legacy. He would be selling a lie. We returned from Mrs. Hayes's office, united by a cold, shared purpose. The house, which had been a prison, was now a stage. We were the lead actresses. The performance began that very night. We sat in the kitchen, waiting for David to return from his client meeting. When he walked in, smelling of sweat and that metallic tang of panic, he found us at the table. Sarah was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. I was staring into a cold cup of tea, the picture of maternal despair. What's wrong?" he asked, his eyes darting between us, instantly wary. Sarah, in a masterful stroke of acting, took a shuddering breath. I told her. David. I had to. I told her everything. David's face went white. "You what?" he snarled, taking a step toward her. "I told her about the money we owe," Sarah cried, shrinking back, playing the part of the terrified wife he had created. "I told her we were going to lose everything." I looked up at David, my eyes carefully filmed with tears I did not feel. "Son," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Is it true, this debt Sarah says? She says they've threatened you." The tension in David's shoulders evaporated. He saw his opening. He was not cornered. He was being handed the script. He rushed to my side, kneeling, taking my hand. His own was clammy. "Oh, Mom, I am so sorry," he said, burying his head in my lap. "I didn't want you to know. I didn't want to worry you. Sarah, you shouldn't have." What are we going to do?" I asked, stroking his hair, my hand feeling like a separate, reptilian thing. He has a plan." "Margaret," Sarah whispered, right on cue. "A way to fix it. But it's the collection." I let out a sob that felt surprisingly real. I had become a better actress than I knew. "Oh, David, not your father's. No, not that. Anything but that." This was the moment. He looked up, his eyes shining with false tears. Mum, it's the only way. It's just for a little while. We can buy them back. It's to save us. To save this family. For 3 days, we played this grotesque scene. I was the grieving widow, slowly coming to terms with the sacrifice. Sarah was the supportive wife, gently persuading me that this was the only path. And David was the master of the house, triumphant. He was so giddy with relief, so blinded by his own perceived cleverness, that he never saw the web we were spinning. He thought he had won. He did not know that every time he walked into the garage to text his buyer, Sarah was documenting it. Her phone, which he never checked, became our primary weapon. Every message he sent confirming the deal, every threat he received from the loan shark, every detail of the transaction. She screenshotted it all and forwarded it directly to Mrs. Hayes's secure server. By Thursday, Mrs. Hayes had a file thick enough to bury him. On Thursday night, David came to me, his face a mask of solemn, false gravity. Mum, the buyer is confirmed. He's very high profile. He insists on privacy. He wants to come on Friday night, at 9 p.m. He wants it to be quiet. Just family. Of course, dear, I said, not looking up from my knitting. Whatever is necessary. He'll bring cash. It will all be over. Mum, I promise. We'll be safe again. Wonderful, I said. My voice was cold, flat. I could feel him looking at me, a flicker of uncertainty. I raised my head, forcing a weak, sad smile. I'll prepare some tea. His relief was palpable. He kissed me on the forehead. You're the best. Mum, you're saving us. Yes, I said. I am. Later that night, I heard him on the phone in his room, his voice a low, confident murmur. He thought I was asleep. He thought Sarah was in the shower. I stood in the dark hallway, listening. Yeah, 9 o'clock, he was saying. No, she's fine. It'll just be me and my old mother. She's half senile anyway. She won't be a problem. Just get it done. I walked back to my room. I did not feel anger. I did not feel betrayal. I felt nothing at all. A vast, cold, empty quiet. I stood in front of my wedding photograph, the one of me and Robert on the beach in Oregon, so young, so unaware. I'm sorry, my love, I whispered to his smiling face. I am so sorry, but I have to save our legacy by destroying our son. Friday night. The clock in the hall chimed 9 times. The house was silent, but it was a heavy, electric silence, like the air before a lightning strike. Sarah and I were in the kitchen, out of sight. We heard the doorbell ring, a sharp, piercing sound. We heard David's footsteps, quick and eager, as he crossed the hall, the sound of the front door opening. You're here? Good, David said, his voice slick with false hospitality. Please, come in. My mother is just... David, I said. My voice cut through his. I walked out of the kitchen and into the entryway, stepping into the light. He turned. His smile froze. 2 men were standing in the doorway. Large, unpleasant men in cheap suits. They were not art dealers. They were thugs. And they were all staring at me, because I was not alone. To my right stood Mrs. Hayes, holding a thick leather briefcase, her face like granite. To my left stood Dr. Croft, the interventionist, A tall man with kind but immovable eyes. And flanking the archway to the living room were two private security guards, both built like refrigerators, their arms crossed. Sarah stepped out from behind me, moving to stand by my side. David's face went a shade of white I had never seen on a living person. He looked from me to Mrs. Hayes, to the guards, and finally to the men in his doorway. The head loan shark, a man with a broken nose and dead eyes, understood the situation instantly. He knew a trap. He spun around to leave, but the two security guards stepped forward, blocking the doorway completely. "Gentlemen," Mrs. Hayes said, her voice cutting through the tension. She stepped toward the loan shark, who was now trapped between the guards. She did not open her briefcase. She simply tapped a slim file folder she held in her other hand. "This file contains a detailed accounting of your illegal lending practices, transcripts of your threats to this family, and your personal tax ID number. It is pre-addressed to the IRS and the State Attorney General. You will leave this property. You will forget this address. And you will consider Mr. Evans's debt, in its entirety, to be a loss. Or I will place this in a mailbox." The man stared at her. He looked at the guards. He looked at me. He gave a sharp, angry nod, pushed past the guards, and disappeared into the night, his henchmen scrambling after him. David was hyperventilating, his eyes wide. He made a move, as if to run after them. "Wait. No. Sit down, David," I commanded. My voice did not shake. It was a steel rod. He turned, bewildered, and saw the living room. He saw the blank walls. He saw the cheap, framed photographs where masterpieces should have been. The paintings. Where? "Sit," I said again. Dr. Croft gestured to the sofa. David, his legs suddenly giving out, stumbled and fell into the cushions. Mrs. Hayes stepped in front of him. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a second, much thicker file. She dropped it onto the coffee table in front of him. "This," she said, "is your life. It is the evidence of your embezzlement from Clearview Capital Partners. It is the full list of your gambling debts. It is a signed, notarized affidavit from your wife, detailing your domestic abuse, both financial and physical. It is irrefutable." David looked at the file, then at Sarah, his face contorting into a mask of pure childish rage. "You," he spat. "You did this. You betrayed me." Sarah stood tall, her hands clenched at her sides. She said nothing. She did not have to. I stepped forward. I looked down at my son, this stranger on my sofa. "You have two choices, David," I said, my voice as cold as the empty space in my heart. "Choice A. There is a black car waiting outside. It will take you directly to an inpatient rehabilitation facility in Utah. You will stay for 90 days. You will sign over your power of attorney to Mrs. Hayes. You will not have access to a phone. You will not pass go. This is non-negotiable. And B," he whispered, his eyes terrified. "Choice B," I said, pulling my phone from my pocket. "I call 911. I hand the police this file, and they arrest you for theft, wire fraud, and domestic assault. And I promise you, I will testify." He stared at me, searching for the mother he had manipulated, the grieving widow he had planned to cheat. She was gone. He saw only me. He knew he had lost. The fight did not just leave him. It was ripped out. He slumped, a hollowed-out shell, his whole body seeming to shrink. "The car," He choked out. I'll take the car. Dr. Croft nodded, helped him to his feet, and with the security guards, walked him out the front door. We stood there, Sarah and I, in the wreckage of the living room. We listened as the car door slammed, as the engine turned over, as it drove away down the quiet street, taking my son away. After a long time, Sarah turned to me, her face pale but breathing, truly breathing, for the first time in months. I walked to the entryway and picked up the phone. I called a 24-hour locksmith. Yes, I said into the receiver. I need new locks, on all the doors, immediately. When he arrived, Sarah and I stood on the porch together, watching him work under the cold yellow light, the sound of the drill biting into the wood, the first new sound of our lives. Thank you so much for listening. Let me know where you're listening from in the comments. I'd love to connect. Please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, like this video, and hit that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.